ACSM has always had a unique challenge with regard to licensed professional surveyors because it's a national organization of folks who are licensed by the states. So one would, on the surface, say being a member of your state surveyor society is sufficient because that's the organization that's working at the state level where you're licensed. But as you can see from the types of issues that I mentioned that I worked on when I was at ACSM, there are often national issues that affect a lot of surveyors, and if they don't affect them personally, it does affect them professionally. One of the things that I have worked on in my 30 years with this community is the idea of enhancing the professional image of surveyors, and I use the term surveyors very broadly to mean now all geospatial practitioners. That was one of the challenges that I was presented early on, was the surveyors felt that their work was not appreciated by the general public, that their image was not that of a professional. And I was asked to help in enhancing that professional image. As a result, my job changed at ACSM, and I went from being the government affairs director to being the assistant executive director for public affairs, and I was responsible for both government relations and public relations. And in the 30 years that I've been working in this community, I have not yet had somebody come up to me and say, John, the job is done, we have a great professional image, you can move on to something else. So it is a continuous, ongoing activity to educate the public, to educate decision makers about what the surveying, mapping, geospatial community is, the fact that these are trained and educated and individuals who provide an important public service that affects public health, welfare, and safety. And so I think that that effort continues.
I agree. And actually, a question that I had for you involved the outreach and education efforts that in the surveying and mapping communities. As you said, it's an ongoing struggle that we deal with. And you've touched on it a little bit. Are there any specific initiatives or involvement with MAPPS along those lines that you may be able to mention or kind of highlight?
Well, one of the things that I was involved in the 1980s at ACSM, under the banner of public relations, was the board funded a program that I headed, where we did two very detailed, scientifically conducted public opinion polls. The first thing we did was we polled 500 surveyors using a standard random selection. A professional firm did 500 telephone interviews with surveyors. And that poll asked questions about what the surveyor's view was of his own profession, sort of a self-assessment. And the second thing it did was it tried to quantify who are the users of surveying services. And then based on that second part of that poll, we did a second poll of the client base. We went to engineers, to land use attorneys, to different groups of users of surveying services. And what we found was astonishing. First of all, what we found was that surveyors actually had very low self-esteem. But the clients held surveyors in very high regard. Surveyors viewed what they do on projects as a necessary evil to their client. The client viewed it as an absolutely essential part of the success of their projects. The other thing that that poll found was that the clients viewed surveyors as being technically very competent. But from a business standpoint, they left a lot to be desired. We got comments about, the survey was on time, it was accurate, it provided exactly the data we needed, but the plat was delivered in this tattered, rolled up format that, that the client would not want to take to a planning commission or a public hearing and what have you. So just the presentation of the deliverable by the surveyor wasn't commensurate with the content of the survey that was being performed. So that's where I think MAPPS has really strived to help our members not only with what they do technically, but with their business practices. And I'm rather proud of the level of business acumen that you see among the principals of the member firms in MAPPS. Now, I think there's also a lot of work that that can be done, that we have done and can be done in the public policy arena, in making sure that surveying, mapping, geospatial is recognized as a profession. Again, that has to do with things like procurement. That's why Brooks Act is such an important issue for our members. Things like classifications at the Labor Department and how are different professions classified, how are different positions classified. And I think we have a real struggle, particularly on the surveying side, with workforce development. I'm very concerned that when we come out of this recession, if we have another housing boom, the choke point in the pipeline is going to be a lack of a capacity in surveying to handle another boom in home building. And so I think we, in our community, we have to work to attract young people into the surveying profession and do a better job of discussing that it is a rewarding career, that it could be very rewarding not only personally and professionally, but from a compensation standpoint, it's a well-paying profession, or it can be a very well-paying profession. And so I think workforce development is very important. To that end, MAPPS is launching a scholarship program. It's something that we did many years ago with the Photogrammetric program at Ferris State University. But our new scholarship will be not tied to any individual school, but it'll be a little bit of an incentive to try to attract more young people into this field and helping them with their education and their entry into the profession.
Good. Sounds good. You've touched on, I believe, on this, and the question being, would you give us an example of something that MAPPS does on behalf of the surveying profession that maybe no other organization does? And I think maybe you've touched on that a little bit, maybe with the business approach of MAPPS. And I've talked several times in the magazine and feel strongly that we do all, as surveyors and geospatial professionals, operate in a business environment. We're here to be successful, to make money and do a quality job, and relate with those around us in that environment in a professional way. And so maybe you can just touch on that again or expand. And maybe that's with the business focus of MAPPS, maybe it's kind of the difference.
Well, yes, I think that is the major difference.